She barked at me to move my cane from the aisle like I was vermin, blocking her way to first-class salvation. Some of us paid good money to sit up here, not be tripped by blind beggars. She snapped her voice sharp enough to slice the quiet hum of the cabin. Passengers turned. Some raised eyebrows, others chuckled uncomfortably, and behind her, sitting smugly in seat 3A legs, crossed, clutching her Louis Vuitton tote like a badge of superiority, was the woman who had just humiliated me without even knowing my name. She wore a silk scarf tied too tightly a face, frozen by privilege and a superiority complex that echoed off the fuselage louder than any engine I sat still. My hand tightened around the curved wood of my walking stick. My sunglasses hid eyes that had seen war darkness loss and power. I'm Marcus Hale. I live quietly in the hills just outside Washington, D.C., in a modest home surrounded by trees I can no longer see, but still feel. I'm not a man who seeks confrontation. I value silence, predictability, peace. But sometimes peace is a luxury denied even at 30,000 feet above ground. Especially when cruelty finds your seat number. I was just traveling to attend a charity gala, one I helped organize for veterans and survivors of service-related blindness. I'd flown hundreds of times before I always sat quietly, never drawing attention. But today, the storm had found me, and it wore Chanel No. 5. Her name, I'd soon learn, was Evelyn Cartwright. Daughter of some shipping magnate founder of a cosmetics line she never actually worked to build. She had that tone, fake sweetness with blades hidden beneath. She wasn't elected to any position of power, she simply bought it. People bowed because she made sure her heels were louder than her conscience. I heard her lean across the aisle to whisper, "This is why they should keep people like that in the back. You never know what diseases they carry. It's unsanitary." The woman beside her chuckled. I recognized the sound, the laugh of someone who'd trade morality for proximity to money. The flight crew apologized to her, not me. They offered to move me to the back, said it might be more comfortable. I declined, politely, but inside I was counting. Not minutes, not heartbeats, but offenses. The petty slaps of arrogance that pile into something heavier than insult. And then she crossed the line. The steward offered her a drink. She declined. "Not if it's touched by his hands," she said loud enough for the cabin to hear. Someone gasped. Another passenger said, "Ma'am, that's too far." But she only waved a manicured hand and muttered, "He can't even see what I'm wearing. What does he care?" That's when I knew this wasn't about discomfort. It was about disdain. Her kind doesn't want to fix the world. They want it clean by removing what they think is dirty me. I pulled out my phone. Quietly. No one saw what I was doing. They just saw the blind man adjusting his headphones perhaps to hear the in-flight movie better. But I was recording. Not just her words, but the murmurs around. I tapped into voice-to-text, logged every insult, marked every timestamp. Not because I wanted revenge, but because truth needs a witness, even if the witness cannot see. What she didn't know was that this wasn't just another man with a cane. I am the founder of Vision Forward, a national non-profit supported by senators, decorated veterans, and Fortune 500 CEOs. I am a recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom. My blindness did not diminish my sight. She thought I was alone, but I had thousands with me. I simply chose not to flaunt it. Halfway through the flight, the turbulence began not in the sky, but in the cabin. A flight attendant approached me privately and whispered, "We're so sorry. We've had complaints about her comments. Would you like to file a report with the airline? I said no. Not yet, because I wasn't done listening. The woman in 3A wasn't just offending me. She was exposing herself with every word, every sneer, every dig at my blindness. She carved her own downfall. As the plane descended, the captain made an announcement. We have a very special passenger with us today. Mr. Marcus Hale, decorated veteran philanthropist and advocate for the blind. It's our honor to have him on board. Gasps echoed through the cabin like thunder. I didn't rise. I didn't smile. I simply nodded still in seat 3B. But the woman beside me stiffened. Her throat clicked dryly, and then someone, maybe the same attendant she sneered at, added, "Oh, and Mr. Hale is also the keynote speaker at the gala tonight." A portion of the flight's proceeds were donated anonymously by Mr. Hale himself. She turned slowly. Her voice trembling, tried to piece together an apology. I didn't know. I thought you were just. But I lifted my hand gently. Ma'am, your mistake wasn't thinking I was just someone. It was thinking, just someone isn't worthy of dignity. The entire flight applauded. Not for me, but for the truth she tried to bury under perfume and pearls. When we landed, she waited to deboard last. No longer floating, no longer superior, just quiet. And as I walked off, the plane cane in hand, I felt no anger, only clarity. The kind that comes when injustice tries to hide in comfort, and truth walks in blind but unshaken. They say blindness limits you. But that day I saw clearer than anyone else on that plane. I saw a world that still judges by appearances. I saw cruelty masked as class. And I saw how quickly a mask can fall when the world pays attention. Now the skies are the same. The planes still fly, but I sit a little taller. I carry that flight in my memory, not as a wound, but as a lesson. So, if you're ever on a flight and you see someone stumble with a cane or fumble with a seatbelt, don't assume they are less. Because behind those glasses, behind the silence, might be someone who sees more than you'll ever know. They say you can smell entitlement before you see it. And they're right. Because long before she sat down, her presence lingered like a perfume cloud of power and disdain. The kind of scent that doesn't just announce wealth, but demands recognition. I heard her before I saw her, or rather, before I sensed her. The hard clack of her designer heels against the aircraft floor. The impatient sighs as if the plane existed merely to inconvenience her. Even the sound of her tote bag landing beside her had arrogance in it, and then her voice, like glass, dipped in. Honey, smooth but sharp, floated over the aisle, dripping with judgment. "This better be real first class," she said to no one in particular. Not one of those upgraded bus seats they like to sell the peasants. Someone laughed nervously. I didn't flinch. I've heard worse in foreign deserts under gunfire. But she wasn't done. "Oh God," she murmured her words, slicing just beneath audible. "They're letting charity cases up here now." I didn't move. I didn't speak. That's the first lesson. Blindness teaches you patience. The second is precision. I waited, noting every word, every shift in tone. Then came the moment, the one that sealed everything. A flight attendant asked if I needed assistance, and as she leaned over, the woman in 3A leaned back with a scoff. "You people are unbelievable. This is supposed to be exclusive." I knew then that this wasn't random rudeness. This was a declaration. She wasn't just reacting. She was asserting her place in the world. And I was a symbol of what she thought didn't belong. I turned slightly toward her. I didn't see her expression, but I felt the sharp exhale through her nose, the way she fidgeted in her seat like my presence was a rash. She shifted away, muttered something about boundaries and biohazards. Still, I stayed silent, because the more you let them speak, the more truth they reveal. I wasn't here to fight. I was here to understand the shape of her prejudice, to feel it, like the texture of braille beneath fingers. The woman in seat 3A, Evelyn Cartwright, wasn't born cruel. No one is, but cruelty, when paired with unchecked privilege, matures into something far more dangerous. The belief that some lives are ornamental and others disposable. And Evelyn wore that belief like a tailored coat. She was likely praised for being strong, successful, assertive, but no one had ever told her no. No one had ever made her sit beside someone who didn't serve her ego. I was that disruption, an inconvenient passenger in her curated reality. A man across the aisle, mid-40s. Maybe a school teacher leaned toward her and said gently, "Ma'am, he's not bothering anyone." Her reply was cold steel. "He's bothering me." And just like that, she claimed victimhood with the same voice she used to inflict harm. That's when I realized she wasn't just cruel, she was skilled at hiding cruelty behind civility. A master of selective outrage. A public relations queen who knew how to weaponize discomfort. She made a show of spraying sanitizer on her armrest. She requested a seat change, denied. She asked for wine delivered. She adjusted the air nozzle, fluffed her pillow, glared at my cane. I stayed still, I said nothing. But inside, I was cataloging it all. Not for revenge, for record, for accountability, for truth. Because one day the world would hear about the woman in seat 3A not from tabloids or socialites, but from the man she tried to erase. The turbulence started small. First in the cabin. Then inside her, I felt it. People were whispering. The stewardess avoided her row. Someone behind her snapped a picture. Her kingdom was shrinking. And still she didn't see it coming because the entitled never do. They mistake silence for submission and kindness for weakness. But every quiet soul carries a storm. Mine had just begun to stir. The air around us thickened. Not from altitude or pressure, but from the slow-growing awareness that something deeper was unraveling. It wasn't just another flight. It had become a crucible, a quiet courtroom. And the woman in seat 3A, Evelyn Cartwright, had no idea she was already on trial. She flipped through a luxury magazine with forced ease, lips pursed, trying to reassert control over an atmosphere she could no longer command. I sat beside her, unmoving, unseen, yet undeniable, the catalyst she didn't anticipate. My fingers grazed the worn leather wrap of my cane. It had accompanied me through war zones and hospital corridors. Now it bore witness once more, this time to a different kind of battlefield. She began whispering into her phone. I heard every word. "Yes, it's disgusting," she hissed. "They let anyone into first class now. I don't care who he is, blind or not. I shouldn't have to sit next to that. That word, that, not him. Not man, just that." She reduced me to an inconvenience, an object, a stain on her experience. The more she spoke, the more I could feel the storm clouds gathering not outside the aircraft, but within the cabin. Passengers shifted. The woman behind her muttered, "Unbelievable." A man near the galley whispered to a flight attendant, "Why isn't anyone stopping her?" I could feel the current changing. And still I said nothing. I was not there to teach her manners. I was there to remind the world that silence does not mean submission. That dignity once challenged doesn't scream, it stands. So I began preparing not for confrontation, but for revelation. I opened the Notes app on my phone and quietly compiled every timestamp of her cruelty. I uploaded it to the cloud-added context and sent it not to the airline, not to a lawyer, but to a woman named Dr. Alicia Rowan, president of the Vision Forward Board. She would know what to do. You see, this flight was not just a route to a gala. It was the flight carrying the man who founded that gala. The man who helped pass 2 federal accessibility laws. The man whose speech tonight would be broadcast to millions. Evelyn Cartwright had insulted that man because she couldn't see beyond his cane. The seatbelt sign came on. The pilot's voice broke in. "Ladies and gentlemen, please prepare for descent into D.C. It's a clear evening, and we'll be arriving a bit early." The irony stung. We were descending, but something else was rising. A reckoning. Evelyn reclined, slightly adjusting her designer shawl, still believing the world owed her its silence. Then it began. The steward, a young man with steady hands and weary eyes, approached me quietly. "Sir," he said, "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, we've had complaints. You've handled it with more grace than anyone could ask for." I nodded. That was enough. But behind him, I heard a passenger, a teenage girl, speak up. "Why doesn't she have to apologize? If it was anyone else..." The words echoed louder than the engines. Eyes turned to Evelyn. She shifted in her seat. Suddenly, her blanket wasn't enough to shield her. Her jewelry didn't sparkle quite as proudly. The glamour was cracking, and then, as if summoned by some invisible signal, a woman 2 rows up turned and asked, "Excuse me, ma'am, but do you realize who you're sitting next to?" Silence. Thick, breathless. Evelyn blinked. What she croaked. The woman leaned forward. "That man," she said, gesturing to me, "is Marcus Hale. He's a war hero. He built the very nonprofit this plane is partnered with. He's probably paying for your champagne with his donation." Gasps. A dropped phone. Evelyn went pale. She turned to me with sudden urgency, like she'd been thrown into freezing water. I didn't know," she stammered. "No one told me," I thought. I turned my head slightly toward her. Let the quiet settle like snowfall. And I said the only words she deserved in that moment. "You thought wrong. The flight crew didn't need to say anything more. The passengers did it for them." Applause broke out, not thunderous, but steady, respectful. Not for me, for what had been made visible. Evelyn tried to smile, tried to nod, but her face couldn't hold the weight of humility. She looked down, realizing that her empire, the illusion of superiority, was dissolving. And I sat calmly, hands folded on my lap, eyes shielded, but heart open, not gloating, just grounded. Because storms don't need lightning to destroy. Sometimes they just need truth. The plane began its descent, but all eyes weren't on the window. They were on her Evelyn Cartwright seat. 3A, once draped in poise and perfume, now stripped raw by truth. Her mouth opened once, then again, but no words came out. Silence can be deafening when you've spent your life hiding behind noise. I could hear her shallow breathing, her trembling fingers fumbling with the seatbelt she suddenly wished could shield her. She had spent this entire flight decorating her dignity with mockery, and now the very cabin she ruled like a private salon had become a courtroom. She looked at me again, not with contempt this time, but with the wide-eyed panic of a woman who finally realized she had trespassed far beyond her understanding. "Mr. Hale," she whispered, barely audible over the hum of the engines. "I am truly sorry. I didn't know. I didn't let her finish. Not out of cruelty, but clarity. I turned just slightly, my sunglasses catching the reflection of 100 witnessing stares, and said in a tone firm but unraised, "You still don't know." And that's the part that scares me. She looked down. The weight of collective shame pressing harder than gravity. I could feel the shift around us. The flight attendants moved slower. The passengers leaned forward, breath held as if the very arc of this moment was something sacred. When the landing gear dropped, it was not just a signal that we were nearing the runway. It was the full descent of her illusion, and the full rise of a lesson long overdue. The captain made one last announcement. "We'd like to thank a very special guest on board today. Mr. Marcus Hale, recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom and founder of Vision Forward, whose work has changed the lives of countless Americans living with disability. Thank you for your service, sir." The cabin erupted. It wasn't loud or chaotic. It was dignified. Earnest, I felt hands clap some, even on shoulders. A child's voice shouted, "Thank you, mister," from the back. I smiled gently, not because I needed praise, but because the moment had finally turned. Not toward me, but toward what was right. Evelyn didn't speak again. The wheels touched down with a jolt of reality. The plane taxied toward the gate. Everyone remained seated, though the seatbelt sign had blinked off. For a second, no one moved, as if they were waiting for something more. Then the schoolteacher from across the aisle stood. "Can I help you with your bag, sir?" he asked. I nodded. He lifted it with quiet care. Not pity. I stood slowly, deliberately. And as I did, something extraordinary happened. A woman in row 5 stood and clapped again. Then a man behind her. Then another row after row of passengers rising. Not because they were told to, but because they had seen something. Not spectacle, not scandal. But a moment where truth outshone wealth and character silenced cruelty. Evelyn remained seated. I walked down the aisle. Cane in one hand, silence in the other. People nodded. Some touched my shoulder gently as I passed. The steward held the door for me with both hands. "Thank you for letting us witness that," he said softly. "The way you handled it. We'll never forget." Outside, the air smelled different. Sharper, cleaner. I waited at the curb while a car approached a black sedan with tinted windows. The driver got out, Mr. Hale. He said, "Dr. Rowan asked me to ensure you arrived in style." He winked. She saw the upload. I smiled, just enough. Before I stepped in, I turned back once. Through the glass of the terminal window, I saw Evelyn Cartwright standing at the baggage claim alone, her eyes darting as if searching for a version of the world that still obeyed her. It was gone, and I rode into the city not as a victim of insult, but as a witness to change. You see, every injustice creates an opportunity for silence to become voice, for judgment to become lesson, for ignorance to become clarity. And on that flight, somewhere above Virginia skies, a woman lost her mask and found her mirror. And a plane full of strangers found their courage one row at a time. The gala was already in motion by the time I arrived. Flashbulbs sparked like summer lightning outside the glass dome of the Kennedy Center limousines, curved in a seamless arc along the front entrance, spilling out politicians, celebrities, veterans in dress blues, and donors in black tie gowns. But for me, none of it shimmered brighter than the murmurs I heard as I stepped onto the carpet. Murmurs not of fame, but of what had just happened 30,000 feet above them. News travels fast when truth flies with it. I adjusted the lapel of my suit-tailored charcoal gray pin still resting on my chest, a folded flag over a silver braille plate, a nod to where I came from, and what I carried still. A young woman with a headset rushed toward me. "Mr. Hale, Sir Dr. Rowan wants you backstage." They bumped the order. "They want you to close the night now after what happened." "You're the story," I nodded. No rush in my step. I had walked through worse fires than red carpets. Backstage was hushed, velvet-lined nerves buzzing in corners. Alicia Rowan stood near the curtain. Her jaw set, her eyes wide with a mix of fury and awe. "Marcus," she said, pulling me into a quiet corner. "CNN already picked it up. Someone on the flight uploaded a video edited respectfully. It's gone viral in an hour. Evelyn Cartwright's PR team issued a statement, but it's too late." People saw. I wasn't trying to go viral, I said, adjusting my cane by the wall. "I was just trying to arrive." "You did," she whispered. And then some. A stagehand waved. 2 minutes. I took a breath. Let the silence wrap around me. Let the crowd's anticipation tremble just beyond the velvet. And then I stepped out. The stage was a sea of lights. Behind me, the giant screen glowing with the words, "Vision Forward." Annual Honors Gala before me. Senators, business leaders, survivors. Children, old friends in wheelchairs. Wives of fallen heroes and men with scars. You couldn't see, but always felt I walked to the podium. My cane tapped twice. Then I paused and I began. "I was insulted yesterday," I said, steady, soft, but clear. "And again this morning. And once more just a few hours ago on a flight to this very city. Not with fists, not with weapons, but with words. Dismissals, eyes that looked through me as though I was baggage without a tag." I paused. The room held its breath. But let me tell you what, I also received silence. Not the good kind. The complicit kind. The kind that lets a cruelty bloom unchecked until it doesn't. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small slip of paper. This is the transcript of what was said to me. Not to shame anyone, but to remind everyone. Because you cannot heal what you refuse to confront. I read 3 sentences from Evelyn's voice. Gasps, a rustle, but no interruptions. Then I folded the paper, slowly returned it to my jacket and said, "Now, let me tell you what else happened." A child said, "Thank you." A steward bowed. Strangers stood. The sky didn't fall, but something else did. A mask. And in its place we saw a face, not mine, theirs, yours. Ours. I let the silence settle again. Then I smiled. Not because it was over, but because something was beginning. We founded Vision Forward to change what the world sees. Not just with eyes, but with hearts. With policy. With persistence. Tonight, let us remember, our vision is not a luxury. It is our legacy. The applause didn't just rise, it rolled, like a tide reclaiming shoreline. Not claps of pity, not cheers of admiration, but the thunder of people who had witnessed. A truth stripped of pretense. A mirror held up to a world too used to looking away. Afterward, as the music swelled and drinks clinked, and old soldiers hugged old enemies, Alicia handed me her phone. "Want to see something?" she asked. I chuckled. "I can't." "Then let me tell you." She said Evelyn Cartwright just resigned from the board of her own company, and she issued a statement that sounded like she meant it for once. I tilted my head. "We'll see. Time teaches more than press releases." That night I stood on the rooftop patio alone. wind brushing my face, DC's skyline, twinkling like Braille written in stars. Somewhere behind me, cameras still flashed, but I was already beyond them, beyond the applause. Because the greatest honor I carried wasn't a medal. It was the knowledge that when cruelty rose, I didn't raise my voice. I raised the truth. And that is how storms pass. They say justice arrives with gavels and courtrooms, but sometimes it boards quietly through gate. 27B wears dark sunglasses, carries a cane, and waits. Not to prove anything, but to endure, observe, and finally reveal. What happened on that plane wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about humiliating someone who once wielded power like a sword and used it to cut down strangers. It was about holding a mirror to a world that forgets too often and too easily. That dignity is not assigned by wealth, beauty, or class. It is inherent, irrefutable. Unseen sometimes, but never absent. I didn't ask for applause. I didn't seek the viral headlines, the interviews, or the photo ops that came in the days that followed. I've lived through fire, seen men fall, heard last words whispered into dust. I've known silence that doesn't end when the noise stops. And in that silence I learned that the greatest resistance isn't fury, it's grace. That standing tall doesn't always require sight, just unshakable knowing of what is right. So, to those watching this story, reading these words, whispering to yourself, what would I have done? Ask a better question. What will I do next time? Because there will be a next time. There will be another moment on another plane, or a checkout line, or a neighborhood committee meeting, or a classroom or a sidewalk when someone is reduced by another's ignorance. In that moment, be the person who stands. Be the voice that says, "That's not right." Be the silence that shields not the one that abandons. Be the hands that help not because they're seen, but because someone needs them. If you've ever felt invisible, I see you. If you've ever been dismissed, I believe you. If you've ever been told you don't belong, let this remind you, you do. You always have. To those who walk this world without sight, know that some of us still see with our hearts wide open. To those who live with scars, with canes, with chairs, with battles won in silence, know that your presence changes rooms. And to Evelyn Cartwrights of the world, may you learn. Not from the fall, but from the eyes that never stopped watching, even when you thought you were alone. This was not a story about a blind man on a plane. It was a story about a world ready to see again. And if this story moved you, if it stirred something deep inside, if it reminded you that decency isn't weakness but power, then join us. Share it. Speak it. Live it. Because the world doesn't change by watching. It changes by choosing. I'm Marcus Hale. And I don't need eyes to see that the future, if we dare to be kind, is brighter than we ever imagined. Subscribe for more stories like this. Leave a comment, share with someone who needs it, and above all, choose courage over comfort.